Katie, Willie, the big question. Is it too early to talk about the midterm elections? Quick thoughts. Katie?
Yes, and that's this week's episode of Two Blocks from the White House. We'd like to thank you for listening to us and spending your time with us here. No. It is never too early, and that is because so many of the decisions in this moment being made by the most powerful people in Washington are shaped by the midterms. And the more we talk about it and the more we understand it, the better.
Katie, you had me fooled. I thought we were done. Yes, no, never. Basically, I think Katie was pretty spot on. The midterms have the possibility of being so consequential that it's important to talk about them, even though we are still 7 months and a week away.
We are in total agreement. It is never too early to talk about the midterms in this country. Look, here's the thing. As you note, Willie, they're not until November, but election season is already well underway. Millions of Americans have already voted in primaries in various states. So while we're keeping an eye on the war in Iran, in fact, Katie, once again, you're joining us all the way from our new bureau in Doha, I understand. Congratulations, Katie.
Many
today
blocks from the White House.
Many blocks in the White House. Today we're going to tell you why it's not too early to talk about the midterms. I'm Paul Hunter.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Willie Lowry. We're CBC's Washington correspondents, 2 blocks from the White House, although, of course, Katie is not.
Katie, it's Tuesday afternoon, and things could change quickly where you are. But after spending the weekend threatening to strike Iran's power plants, Donald Trump then touted peace talks with Iran for, in his words, all caps, of course, a complete and total resolution of our hostilities. What might the midterm elections have to do with all this whiplash messaging from the U.S. president?
I suspect that people in the White House are aware that there aren't any polls right now that suggest the current war in the Middle East is popular with Americans. It's costing more. The cost of living is going up. Cost of gas is going up. Americans have come home in caskets. There is uncertainty, instability across the Middle East. And this is not something that American voters in this moment like. And another thing that Donald Trump really has to think about is that he promised his MAGA base that he would not be the president that would get American troops involved in foreign conflicts, these endless wars overseas. Donald Trump was able to win the 2024 vote because he was able to bring people out to the polls that don't necessarily participate on a regular basis. And Donald Trump, if Republicans want to maintain control of the House, that coalition that got behind Donald Trump in the presidential election in 2024, Trump needs those people to show up. And if they look at an ongoing conflict, a long-term conflict with wide-ranging consequences, those people who might have been attracted to Trump's MAGA policy saying no more forever wars, they might look at that and be cynical and say, well, he's just like everyone else. What's the point in participating if I voted for change? What's the point of participating if the change agent didn't do what he said he was going to do?
He needs an off-ramp, though, doesn't he? I mean, he needs to be able to declare victory, that he achieved what he set out to do, because Trump doesn't, never wants to be seen as not winning. And that's a challenge for him.
But here's the thing. First of all, they did such a poor job of articulating what it was that they were trying to achieve that I think they almost created a situation, especially given that they've killed the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as well as so many levels of the regime. I think that any moment they can just kind of say, we won, we did this, war's over. I think that's the off-ramp. I think there's also the question, as Katie was right to point out, the polls are incredibly unfavorable of this conflict, at least at the moment, right? I haven't seen anything where I think they're hovering around like 40% approval for the conflict. That's pretty low, obviously. Also, that's right around what the president's approval ratings are at the moment. But there's 7 months till the midterms. There's a lot of water that can go under the bridge, right? If he's able to wrap this war up or end it within the next week or weeks, a lot can happen. I think he's banking that the price of gas will fall, price of oil will fall, and it will kind of be an asterisk.
If the war ends, if prices drop, if the economy is stronger as a result, I mean, this is, if Americans buy things more, it's a very resilient economy, right? It's a very consumer-driven economy, but those are some big ifs. But, I'm on the fence about this, right? I mean, it's like, yes, midterms are always bad for sitting presidents, but, what they use, Teflon Don was the original nickname for him back in the day when Stormy Daniels and Access Hollywood Tape and Russia and even through to Bleach and Sunshine as a COVID treatment. But he is resilient, and he came back, and he won again. So I don't know. It's tough, but those are big ifs. If the war ends, if prices drop, those are big things for Trump.
And he doesn't necessarily get to decide when the war ends. That's
Iran has a vote.
Well, exactly.
Willie, we're talking about the midterms, and this might seem a basic question, but and I'll admit, I didn't have my head wrapped around it when I came down to D.C., but it is very important. What are midterm elections, and why is everybody talking about it here in Washington?
Yeah, it is a really good question. Let me just open my history textbook. Midterms
You've got half an hour.
They happen. No. So they're important for a couple reasons. First of all, they're all about Congress, right? There's a big difference between the House of Representatives and the Senate. So representatives get elected every 2 years.
They're like MPs.
Yeah, but it's kind of insane. Every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Very, very frequently, where senators serve 6-year terms. But it's really, in many ways, a litmus test for the party in power. Historically, the party in power loses a few seats, or obviously depends on the year. And this year, Republicans hold a very, very narrow majority, meaning that just a few seats, if just a few seats change hands, that could switch.
And the reason that it's always important to point out the president's name, any city, is not on the ballot, right? It's just about congressmen and congresswomen. But it's always viewed through the prism of the president because it's the first chance voters have to respond to the first couple of years of any president's term, right? And so they may vote against the party of the president simply because they're kind of peeved at the president. So we had, what was it? Obama said he got a shellacking, I think, in 2010, his first midterms. Bush got a thumping, as he put it.
And very much designed by the founders to serve as a counterweight, a counterbalance to the president, right? If the people are upset with those first 2 years, they get an opportunity to hold them in check or hold that person in check.
And one result of that is it's perpetually election mode in this country, because as soon as one election finishes, in this case it was the presidential cycle last a year and a half ago, I guess, a year and a bit ago, boom, start all over again, because the midterms, the next round is only 2 years away. It's like re-electing the House of Commons every 2 years. All 435 representatives, those are the people in the House of Representatives as opposed to the Senate, as you say, come up for re-election every 2 years, including presidential election years, then 2 years later, the midterms, and then 2 years later, the next presidential cycle. It's no wonder it's all about politics in this country, because it is always election season.
Yeah.
And it's also always about fundraising as well, because it's so expensive to try and run these campaigns, to try and stay relevant. If you want to hold on to that seat for more than 2 years, you got to be constantly raising money, because it is so expensive to carry out campaigns.
And by the way, to expound on your Senate thing, just for the sake of my own clarity, it's 1/3 of the Senate every 2 years, and each time they're elected, they're in for 6 years. So you don't come up again for 6 years. 2 years later, it's the next third. 2 years later, it's the next third, and then 2 years after that, it's back to the first third again. Man, it's complicated.
It's super complicated. For the record, 35 Senate seats at play in this upcoming midterm.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Willie, because
I do love this map.
This is my map. This is my hand-drawn map of the United States, and you can see it, and I can see
it. It feels like you're still thinking Christmas.
Because when we talk about the midterms, we often think about the House of Representatives, because that's always in play every 2 years. a year ago, who would have thought that we could have a conversation that maybe the Democrats, who are expected to win back the House, might find a way to win back the Senate? It's not easy. They talk about the path, right? Because what that means is which states are, air quotes here, in play, which are ones that could flip. And it's hard as some politicians here might put it, in these divided states of America. Republican states tend to stay Republican. Democrat states tend to stay Democrat, except in times of real political turmoil, which arguably we're in right now. And so you've got, people look at Maine possibly flipping from Republican to Democrat, and North Carolina very likely. Texas, how many times have I done stories, all of us, on whether Texas could turn? But there's enough states maybe in play. Man, if that were the case, these midterms, that Democrats win back the House and the Senate, man, all bets would be off.
That changes the game,
doesn't it? Willie, a listener on Spotify left us a comment asking here's another one for you, how redistricting efforts could affect the midterms. You got another 45 minutes? Take that one.
All right, I'm on it. So redistricting, first of all, it is a completely legal, normal part of the American process, but usually done every 10 years after a census. After a census. Essentially, the redistricting is done to better reflect the current demographics of a place, which, of course, change over time. But what we're seeing play out right now is this mid-decade redistricting, where it's essentially kind of become politicized. You have the parties in power in each state, or in many states, trying to reconfigure the electoral map to favor their parties. You had Trump really pressuring Texas to do that. They did that, essentially redrawing the map to give them potentially 5 more House seats. Then California essentially did a rebuttal, doing the exact same thing, redrawing their map to give Democrats potentially 5 more seats. We have redistricting happening in several states, including Missouri, North Carolina, Florida, Virginia, all potentially in the process as well of redistricting, not guaranteed though. So it potentially could play an important role in November.
I think it speaks to the stakes this time around. It's not, they're within the rules, but it's unusual in this cycle.
The other thing to mention is that it starts this never-ending cycle. And we went to North Carolina about a month ago. We went and specifically did a story about redistricting, and we talked about what was going on with gerrymandering, which is when redistricting happens to give one party a political advantage over another. And you get different districts that look like, in North Carolina, there was a district drawn by Democrats that looked like a snake. There's a dog-shaped district right now in North Carolina. It creates these maps that when you look at them, they don't necessarily make any sense. You're like, what's going on here? But it creates this never-ending cycle of who's going to one-up the next person, who's going to one-up the next person. And the thing is, Democrats in the past have done it too. It is like, I know that in this moment, Donald Trump, is openly saying, let's create more seats so that we can maintain control. He said that specifically about Texas. Even though that is happening, it creates this never-ending cycle. And again, it plays into cynicism. And people are like, what's the point of going out and participating and exercising my democratic right when, things are set up to have a certain outcome?
The shape of the districts kind of remind me. I mean, it's important to note, right, for a Canadian context, it is very different from how we do things in Canada, obviously, right?
Elections
in the U.S.,
Canada.
Elections Canada, a federal...
Yeah. A nonpartisan federal body that looks at, what's the right way for everybody to determine the boundaries of where people vote. In the United States, it's on a state-by-state basis, and it is partisan. And it is a very different way of determining, even the way elections are run on Election Day for the most part, which, speaking of, Katie, so here now there's talk about I made air quotes there, but I don't need to. Federalizing the upcoming midterm elections. Katie, Willie's taken 2 tough ones in a row. It's your turn now. What a thrill! You get to explain federalizing the upcoming midterms.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that the Democrats in the past have done it too. It is like, I know that in this moment, Donald Trump, is openly saying, let's create more seats so that we can maintain control. He said that specifically about Texas. So I think that
Did you hear the deep breath?
Yeah. She's
Lucky
sorry, that's
me.
a bad connection. Can
Lucky
you hear me?
me.
I'm under a bridge.
It's like
says
I gotta
Katie.
go. The alarms are going off. I gotta disconnect right away. No, it's so I think for a Canadian audience and for Canadian context, Willie, you mentioned Elections Canada. You guys are talking about Elections Canada. Canada has this body that sort of runs how things are going to go and is done in a nonpartisan way so that it doesn't erode trust and sort of undermine credibility of something that is so important like a federal election. In the United States, these elections are run by the state, and there is some thought around it. It's actually it's thought to be something that's a positive because it's harder for foreign interference if that were to be an issue. If there was some sort of cyber attack or something like that, it's better for security when it's a patchwork of different states running elections versus one body doing it. And it's also in the Constitution. And so Donald Trump has been musing publicly, talking openly about it in front of journalists, in front of reporters in the Oval Office about so-called federalizing elections. And he called out specific states. He said that he thinks that people within his administration should control how elections are run in certain states. And it's come as he makes complaints about election results. And this essentially all gets back to a core point of Donald Trump's sort of political career, arguing falsely that elections are rigged and elections are stolen, and that he still to this day claims the 2020 election was stolen from him, that he actually won that there was election fraud in a number of different states. He's particularly focused on the state of Georgia, even launching some kind of new investigation. There's something going on with federal authorities that's sort of been going on quietly in Georgia in recent weeks and months. And if you start talking about this now, if you start undermining credibility in the election process, it gets people to not necessarily believe the results. And watch what happened in the weeks and months after the vote in 2020. I attended a number of Stop the Steal rallies where people believed what Donald Trump was saying about election fraud. And then, of course, we all witnessed what happened on January 6th, where it was sort of the ultimate culmination of people who supported Donald Trump going to the Capitol, many of them believing truly they were doing, some of them have described it to me as they were doing their patriotic duty because they thought the election was stolen. And the election was not stolen. So these are powerful things for Donald Trump to say, and it could, again, have very powerful consequences.
Allegations that the elections were stolen. He said it so often and so frequently at this point that it almost feels there's no longer any pushback against it, which is really dangerous, right? He's creating his own narrative, and it's a narrative that a significant amount of the country believes at this point.
All of this was born out of the false allegation that there was fraud to begin with. How to end it's as if Trump is trying to say we got to end the fraud that never happened. But hence as well now, Donald Trump pushing hard for what's known as, what Trump calls the Save America Act, but is technically the SAVE Act, the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. Here's Trump on that.
The most important thing we can have is what's called the Save America Act. Don't make any deal on anything unless you include voter ID, and you have to be a citizen to vote. You have to show citizenship to vote. Very easy to do.
There's a lot in the SAVE Act, but to pick up on the last thing that Trump said there, it's very easy to do. And that's the point that Democrats make in opposing it, that it's not, for many, many, many Americans, is it comes down to voter ID when you're casting that ballot. And what the SAVE Act is all about is you've got to prove who you are. It's reverse onus. You've got to walk in there and say, this is really me. And the way you do that, per the SAVE Act, is with a passport. And the problem is half of the country doesn't have a passport, and they're expensive.
It leads to a whole range of questions about who does this affect and who is going to have a harder time if they want to show up and vote? And are there questions from Democrats to say, well, look, this could disproportionately hurt lower income voters, particularly could this hurt communities of color, those kinds of things. And those are some of the questions we're hearing in this moment.
And as Democrats would also underline, historically, a lot of the people affected, in their view, by the SAVE Act are people who historically have voted Democrat. So the supposition here from the Democratic perspective is that there's something nefarious going on here, that this is in fact a way to shrink the votes going toward Democrats and grow them for Republicans. Let's move on to Democrats. Carol D. Decker in Tillsonburg, Ontario. Fun fact, Willie? Tillsonburg, CKOT Radio. I auditioned for a job there many, many, many years ago.
I fear you say audition. They didn't give it to you?
They didn't give it to me.
What were they thinking?
I'm still bitter.
As you should be.
I didn't get the job.
Wow.
I think we should cancel the question because you didn't get the job.
Tillsonburg's loss is our gain.
No questions.
Well, I love Tillsonburg, though, and that whole gateway to Simcoe. Carol D. Decker from Tillsonburg asked us what the Democrats are doing to prepare for the midterm elections. Willie, back to you. What are Dems up to, and how big a deal is this for them as a party?
Well, I think it's a huge deal for them as a party, right? They are trying to find an identity. There's this push and pull between the more progressive wing, which also happens to be, of course, both the younger and the older wings, and the more conservative or centrist wing. And I think if you look at what happened just earlier this month in Texas with the primary that saw James Tellerico pretty handily beat Jasmine Crockett, it would suggest that they're leaning into candidates who have more broader appeal, trying to win that kind of moderate vote, eat into some of the Republicans. But it's kind of the eternal internal question among Democrats, that push and pull between moderate and progressive wings.
I think the challenge for Democrats is that they have kind of been banking on the anti-Trump vote, not the pro-Democrat vote.
And that's never a recipe for success.
No, it's not. It's not. It's the rage vote, right? And you might, midterms are the place where rage vote can come into play. Let's be honest, right? Mm-hmm. But I think if there's a criticism for Democrats broadly, it's that, what are you going to do? It's like 7-Up the Uncola, right? Don't tell me what you're not. Tell me what you are, and then maybe I'll vote for you.
Yeah, the Democrats have had a really significant challenge, sort of laying out a vision for what they will do for the average voter in order to sort of win them back. And Donald Trump did such a much better job in terms of whether he was going to make good on his promises or not. What he said to Americans was enough to motivate a massive coalition of voters to get him back into the White House. And we saw in 2024 that the argument that I'm not Trump and democracy's in jeopardy, those were not arguments strong enough to win back voters. Democrats appear to still be trying to learn from their losses, and if they can do well in the midterm elections, it will largely sort of be another fact-finding exercise. Okay, what candidates were able to, win back seats? What kind of campaigns did they run, and what does that tell us about what voters want to see? And they need to take that information and then shape it into something to get them to a spot for 2028 where they're competitive with whoever the Republican candidate is going to be.
Katie, I was walking to work this morning. One of the things about D.C. is these, I'm sure both of you have seen the sticker and poster wars, the anti-Trump stuff that's up all over the place. And I saw one this morning, and it was in the style of those old Uncle Sam, I want you for the U.S. Army posters. And of course, it was Trump's face under the top hat of Stars and Stripes. And it said, I want you to die protecting the Epstein files. Epstein, Katie, is a word that we haven't said too many times yet on this podcast. What could that name mean for the midterms, Katie?
All over buildings up in my neighborhood, there are also some posters put up showing Donald Trump, a photo of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein, and then it says at the bottom, need a babysitter, and then it has a link to a website. So that is just, if you want to know what the tone is like in Washington,
and it gets even worse
among the people that live there. Oh yeah, there's plenty of those kinds of things around the city, and you see them all the time. Donald Trump did not get out there and sell this war to tell Americans this is what we need to do and here's why. He has not done that in the way that we've seen other administrations sell wars to the American public to try and build sentiment around it. And when there's no sort of narrative, and the narrative is all over the map, it really creates a vacuum. And so people are asking questions about, well, why is this necessary? And one of the things that's sort of filling that vacuum are conversations and questions from whether they're people running for office, whether it's everyday Americans, they're asking, is this something meant to be a distraction? And one of the things that had been causing so much trouble for Donald Trump is the Epstein files. And it was a different kind of trouble that Donald Trump has ever faced because it deeply divided his MAGA base. Again, same with what we're seeing with what's going with the ongoing conflict. These are two things that have really caused backlash among key members of his coalition of supporters. These are things that are upsetting the MAGA base that Donald Trump is going to need to rely on for the midterm elections. But again, people are legitimately asking the question, you know what we're talking about right now? We're talking about what's going on in the Middle East, this massive conflict that has huge implications for people who live in the region and all over the world. And you know what we're not talking about? We're not talking about this massive, horrific scandal directly linked to the U.S. president in terms of all of his time as being a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump has denied any wrongdoing. And has been very adamant about that, saying that, he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club or his private club because he found him to be a creep. But still, there are so many references to Donald Trump and the Epstein files. It leads to all of this speculation because there isn't a narrative about the war that Americans are necessarily buying into. And so it naturally leads to speculation. And this is one of the things that people are speculating about.
And this is going to sound a little crass, but I think it's important, and I think it's probably part of the administration's calculus. Right now, the American death toll is still relatively low. If that were to change, I think that's when you would have serious political ramifications. So I think the administration thinks if they can wrap this up while the death toll remains low, they have a chance of kind of moving on. But if it rises, that will really, really eat away and potentially divide the MAGA base even more.
So as we head toward the midterms, Donald Trump, who promised no war, and the U.S. is in a war, who promised low gas prices, and gas prices have gone through the roof, who had talked about all the stuff that Katie just did regarding the Epstein files, and they're still not completely out there. 7 months to go. Normally this time we answer one of your question on another subject that someone has written into us, but this week the whole episode was driven by questions from listeners, even if we didn't read all of them out. So it's been fantastic. Keep them coming. And thanks to listeners for all those questions. If you do have a question for us or feedback about what you're hearing, shoot us an email. WashingtonPod, all one word, at CBC.ca. That's WashingtonPod at CBC.ca.
Or leave a comment for us on Spotify.
And make sure you listen to us and follow us on your favorite podcast app.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Willie. We'll do it all again next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul. We miss you, Katie.
Hopefully I'm back in studio next week so we're all 2 blocks from the White House together.
Bye-bye.